My sister demanded I cancel my wedding because she got divorced. But when she tried to seduce my fiancé, I hired security, and the mother who always defended her finally kicked her out. I'm 30 years old. I work in digital marketing, and I need to tell this story because I still can't believe everything that happened in the last few months with my wedding, my mom, and my half-sister. The thing is, I thought my family would be happy for me. You know, because I'd been with Lucas for 6 years and we were finally getting married. But turns out my happiness was a problem for them. Or, well, specifically for my sister Taylor and for my mom, who basically does whatever Taylor wants. I guess I should start from the beginning, so this whole mess makes sense. Lucas proposed to me in March of this year. It was super sweet. Nothing extravagant, but perfect for us. He did it in the same park where we had our first date 6 years ago. And I obviously said yes, because this man is literally my best friend, and the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. He was 31 when he proposed. We worked together at the same company, though in different departments. And honestly, I thought everyone was going to be happy for us. We decided to have the wedding in January of the following year. So, we gave ourselves about 10 months to plan everything, which is actually quite a bit of time, but we wanted to do it right and without stress. You know? The first person I called after Lucas proposed was my mom. Because, well, she's my mom, and I thought she was going to be happy. But her reaction was super weird from the start. Instead of congratulating me or getting excited, the first thing my mom said was, "Have you thought about how Taylor is going to feel about this?" And I was like, "Excuse me? My engagement is about Taylor?" But I didn't say anything in that moment because I didn't want to start a fight on my engagement day. To give you context, Taylor is my half-sister. She's 24 years old. She's the daughter of my mom and my stepdad Andrew. And ever since we were kids, my mom has always treated her like she's made of glass. Like the whole world has to adjust to Taylor's feelings and needs because she's the baby of the family or something. I basically grew up learning that my achievements weren't as important because we had to be careful not to make Taylor feel bad, and that included everything from getting better grades to having a stable relationship. Everything was a potential problem for my sister's self-esteem. My biological dad died when I was 7 years old. It was a car accident, and honestly, I don't remember much about him except that he was affectionate with me. But after that, my mom married Andrew when I was 9, and Taylor was born when I was 10. Andrew was never mean to me, but he was definitely always more of a father to Taylor than to me, which I understand to a certain extent, but my mom basically decided that for the new family to work, I had to be the perfect understanding older sister who always put Taylor first. And well, that's what I did for years, because I wanted my mom to be happy, and because Taylor was just a little kid, at first. But when you grow up, you realize that type of family dynamic isn't normal or healthy. Lucas and I started planning the wedding. We found a beautiful venue. It wasn't anything super ostentatious, but it was elegant and exactly what we wanted. We hired a coordinator, had invitations made, all that stuff. My best friend Lauren was going to be my maid of honor. I had 8 other bridesmaids, including Taylor, because, well, she's my sister, and I thought it was the right thing to invite her. Even though our relationship has always been complicated because of all the weird family dynamics, Taylor has always been super competitive with me. If I bought a car, she had to buy a better one. If I got a promotion at work, she had to brag about something more impressive, and so on with everything. But I never thought it would go as far as it went with my wedding. In May, literally 2 months after Lucas proposed to me, Taylor met a guy named Matthew on a dating app. They went out, 3 times, and she was already saying he was the love of her life, that she'd never felt a connection like that, all that stuff. Lucas and I would look at each other like, well, Taylor being Taylor, because she's always been that intense with relationships. She falls in love super fast, and then things burn out just as quickly. After 3 months of dating Matthew, and when I say 3 months, I mean 90 days literally, Taylor announced she was going to marry him. My mom was happy, Andrew was happy, everyone acting like this was completely normal and not a super impulsive and probably terrible decision. I tried to talk to Taylor. I told her don't you think you should take more time to get to know him? And she got really angry with me. Said I was jealous because she was getting married before me even though I'd been with Lucas longer. And my mom called me afterwards to tell me to stop being negative and to support my sister so well. I shut up and let her do whatever I wanted because clearly my opinion didn't matter. Taylor and Matthew got married in June. It was a super quick courthouse wedding with just close family. Nothing elaborate. And I remember that day my mom was radiant with happiness. much happier than she'd been when Lucas proposed to me, which hurt, but I was already used to that kind of thing. The thing is, Taylor's marriage lasted exactly 2 months. 2 months. In July, Taylor discovered that Matthew was cheating on her with her best friend. And when I say her best friend, I mean the girl who had been her maid of honor at the courthouse wedding. So, all super dramatic and horrible. Taylor was obviously devastated. She moved out of the house she shared with Matthew and moved back in with my mom and Andrew, and spent the next few weeks crying and saying all men were trash and love didn't exist and all that stuff. I felt bad for her, obviously, because being cheated on is horrible regardless of the circumstances, so I tried to be there for her. I called her, went to visit her, did everything a big sister is supposed to do. But this is where things started to get really ugly. In November, 4 months after Taylor got divorced and 2 months before my wedding, my mom called me, and what she said basically left me speechless. She told me she needed to talk to me about something important, and I thought maybe it was going to be about some detail of the wedding or about if she could help with something. But no. My mom told me, literally with these words, that I needed to consider canceling my wedding, or at least making it much smaller and more discreet, because Taylor was still suffering from her divorce, and that seeing my happy wedding was going to be too painful for her. I stayed silent for 30 seconds because I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and then I said, "Mom, are you serious?" And she said yes, that she was being completely serious, that as a mother she needed to think about both daughters, and that I had to be understanding of Taylor's situation. I explained that we'd been planning this wedding for almost a year, that we'd already paid non-refundable deposits, that we had 150 confirmed guests, that I couldn't just cancel everything because Taylor made impulsive decisions that turned out badly. My mom got angry and said I was being selfish and that I was prioritizing a party over my sister's feelings, and I told her that prioritizing my own wedding wasn't selfishness, it was literally normal. The conversation ended with my mom hanging up on me, and I sat there in my apartment feeling like I was in an alternate reality. Lucas came home from work an hour later and found me crying on the couch. I told him everything, and he was just as incredulous as I was. He told me this was total insanity, that my mom had no right to ask me that, and that we definitely weren't going to cancel or change anything about our wedding for this drama. But it didn't end there, obviously, because with my family, things are never simple. Taylor started calling other family members, telling them her version of the story, which basically was that I was being insensitive and that I was rubbing my happy wedding in her face while she suffered. My cousin Natasha, who's always been cool with me, called to tell me that Taylor was saying I'd been posting pictures of my wedding dress fittings and wedding preparations on social media, specifically to make her feel bad, which was completely false, because I hardly post anything on social media, and the few photos I had put up were super normal and discreet. But Taylor was doing this whole show about how I was a horrible sister who didn't care about her feelings. My Aunt Susan, who's my biological dad's sister, and has always been like a second mom to me, called to tell me she'd heard about the drama and not to pay attention to any of it, that my wedding was important, and that I had every right to be happy and celebrate. That helped a little, knowing that at least some family members weren't buying Taylor's drama, but it was still super stressful having to deal with all this when I was supposed to be excited about my wedding. December came and we had the family Christmas dinner at my mom's house, and I honestly didn't want to go, but Lucas convinced me to go, because he said I couldn't let Taylor and my mom push me away from the whole family. So we went, and the dinner was tense from the start. Taylor didn't even greet me when we arrived. She just looked at me and went to another room, and my mom was acting all weird with me. Super cold, but being extra affectionate with Taylor in front of everyone to make it clear whose side she was on. At some point in the night, after dinner, Taylor started making passive-aggressive comments about weddings and about how some people got married for the right reasons and others just wanted a big party and attention, and everyone knew she was throwing shade at me. There was trying to ignore her because I didn't want to ruin everyone's Christmas. But then my mom started backing her up, saying things like big weddings were unnecessary, and that what mattered was the marriage, not the celebration, and basically also throwing shade at me about how I was being superficial with all the wedding planning. Lauren, my maid of honor, was there because she'd become close to my family after so many years of being my best friend, and she was looking at me like, "Are you going to let them talk to you like this?" And she was right. It had been enough. So I interrupted the conversation and said, "Stop. Let's talk straight, because I'm fed up with this." Taylor looked at me surprised because normally I never confronted anything. I always stayed quiet to keep the peace. but I couldn't take it anymore. I told Taylor directly, "I'm sorry your marriage didn't work out. I really am. But that doesn't mean I have to cancel or hide my happiness. You made the decision to marry someone. You met 3 months ago. I tried to tell you to take your time and you got angry at me. And now you're angry because my 6-year relationship is working out and I'm having the wedding Lucas and I planned. That's not fair and you know it." Taylor turned red and started yelling that I'd always been the favorite, that I'd always had everything easier, that I'd never had to suffer like her. And I literally laughed because it was so absurd. I told her, "Favorite? Really? Mom asked me to cancel my wedding for you. Our whole lives I've had to make myself small so you'd feel better about yourself, but not anymore." My mom jumped in and told me I was being cruel, that Taylor had gone through a difficult divorce, and I told my mom that she'd been choosing her over me for 30 years in every situation, and that I was tired of that too. I told her that if she couldn't be happy for me at my own wedding, then maybe it was better if she didn't come. Andrew, who normally never gets involved in anything, tried to mediate, saying we all needed to calm down and talk like adults, but I was already too angry and hurt to stay there. Lucas and I left my mom's house that night, and in the car I was shaking from pure adrenaline and anger and also sadness because I'd basically just fought with my family 2 weeks before my wedding. When we got home, I sat down and wrote a long email to my mom and Taylor. I told them that after everything that had happened, especially the scene at Christmas dinner, I'd made the decision to uninvite them from my wedding. I explained that this decision wasn't easy, but that I couldn't have people at my special day who clearly weren't happy for me and who had been actively trying to sabotage my happiness for months. I sent a copy of the email to Andrew and some other family members so they'd know my version of events before Taylor and my mom started telling who knows what story. My Aunt Susan responded saying she completely understood and supported my decision. And Natasha also sent me a message saying I'd done the right thing and that if she were in my place, she would have done the same much earlier. That made me feel a little better, but it was still a horrible situation. I never imagined I'd end up uninviting my own mother from my wedding. I thought that was going to be the end of the drama, that my mom and Taylor were going to be angry, but that at least they'd leave me alone to enjoy my wedding in peace. But obviously I was wrong because 2 weeks later, literally 1 week before the wedding, Taylor sent super inappropriate messages to Lucas. Natasha told me later that Taylor had been drinking and telling everyone that Lucas had never really been in love with me, that she'd always noticed he looked at her a certain way, all kinds of weird delusions. The messages she sent Lucas were like stuff insinuating there had always been chemistry between them, telling him that if he was with me just out of obligation she would understand, basically trying to seduce him or something. Lucas showed me the messages immediately. He was super uncomfortable and angry. He told me he was going to block Taylor and that if she showed up anywhere near the wedding, he would personally make sure she left. I was in total shock. I knew Taylor could be competitive and dramatic, but this was another level completely. This was sick. I took screenshots of all the messages in case I needed them later, and Lucas blocked her from his phone and all his social media. I told Lauren what had happened, and she said we were going to hire security for the wedding, that it wasn't negotiable. I at first thought it was excessive, but Lauren insisted, said that with everything that had happened, we couldn't risk my mom or Taylor showing up and causing a scene. So we hired 2 security guards and gave them photos of my mom and Taylor with instructions not to let them in under any circumstances. The wedding day arrived. January was finally here, and I was super nervous but also excited. The morning started perfect. I was with my bridesmaids, including Lauren, at the hotel where we were getting ready, drinking champagne and laughing and taking pictures. Exactly how I'd imagined it would be. My Aunt Susan arrived to help me with the dress and told me I looked beautiful, that my dad would be proud of me, and that made me cry a little, but in a good way. We got to the wedding venue and everything looked perfect. The decorations, the flowers, everything exactly as we'd planned. The guests started arriving, and 30 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to start, one of the security guards let me know that my mom and Taylor had just arrived and were in the parking lot trying to get in. My heart dropped to my stomach. I couldn't believe they'd actually come after everything. But Lauren told me to stay in the room where I was getting ready, that she would handle it. She told me later what happened. My mom and Taylor arrived, dressed for the wedding, completely acting like nothing had happened, like I hadn't explicitly uninvited them. When the security guards told them they couldn't come in because they weren't on the guest list, my mom started yelling that she was the mother of the bride and had every right to be there. And Taylor was crying, saying I was a monster for not letting my own family in. Lauren went out and told them to leave, that I'd been clear that they weren't welcome, and my mom tried to push past Lauren, but the security guards literally had to escort them back to their car. Natasha, who was invited, obviously, recorded part of the show on video from where she was waiting to enter, and sent it to me later. You can see my mom yelling and Taylor crying dramatically, and honestly watching it made me feel bad for a second, but it also reminded me why I'd made the decision to uninvite them. I didn't want that kind of drama on my special day, and I had every right to protect my peace of mind. 2. Ceremony was beautiful, Lucas cried when he saw me walk down the aisle. I cried too. It was perfect. My Aunt Susan walked me down the aisle because my dad wasn't there and neither was my mom, and it was emotional, but it also felt right. She'd always been there for me anyway. The vows were perfect. The party was amazing. We danced until our feet hurt, and there wasn't a single second of drama or negativity. Everyone who was there was genuinely happy for us, celebrating with us, and that was all I'd wanted from the start. On the honeymoon, which was in Costa Rica and was wonderful, my phone was off most of the time, but when I turned it on like 5 days later, I had like 50 messages and missed calls. Most were from Natasha and my Aunt Susan, so I called them to see what had happened. Turns out after the wedding, my mom and Taylor had a fight. Natasha told me that according to what she'd heard, my mom was furious with Taylor about the messages she'd sent Lucas, that someone had shown them to my mom and she went crazy because basically Taylor had tried to ruin my relationship on top of everything else. Apparently my mom told Taylor she'd gone too far, that one thing was being jealous of my wedding, but something completely different was trying to seduce my fiancé, and that she hadn't raised someone like that. Taylor yelled back that my mom was a hypocrite, that she herself had been telling her for months that I was selfish for not canceling my wedding, and that she was only angry now because her actions had real consequences. The fight escalated so much that my mom told Taylor to leave her house, that she needed to find her own place because she was already 24 years old and needed to mature and face the consequences of her actions. I'm not going to lie. Part of me felt a dark satisfaction hearing that my mom had finally set boundaries with Taylor, but another part of me just felt tired of all the drama. Lucas and I talked a lot about all this during the honeymoon, about my family and about how we wanted to handle relationships with them in the future. We decided we'd establish clear boundaries, that we weren't going to tolerate more manipulation or drama, and that if my mom wanted to rebuild a relationship with me, it would have to be on our terms and with a real acknowledgement of how she'd treated me all these years. It's been like 2 months since the wedding now. We're settled into our married life, and honestly, it's everything I wanted. My mom has called me a couple of times, but I haven't answered yet. Not because I want to punish her forever, but because I need time to process everything and decide if I'm ready to have that conversation. Taylor sent me a long message like 3 weeks ago, apologizing, saying she's in therapy and realizes she'd been acting horribly, but I don't know whether to believe her or if it's just another manipulation attempt. My Aunt Susan says, "Time will tell if these are real changes or just words. What I do know is that I made the right decision with my wedding. I could have had my mom and my sister there, but I would have been stressed all day worrying about what drama they were going to cause or what comments they were going to make. Instead, I had a perfect day surrounded by people who genuinely love me and want the best for me, and that's something I'll never regret." Lucas tells me often that he's proud of me for finally standing up and setting boundaries, that he knows it wasn't easy, but that it was necessary, and he's right. Last week, we were sorting through wedding photos to make an album, and Lucas found a picture that Lauren had taken of me right before walking down the aisle, and in that photo you can see my face of pure happiness and peace. He told me, "Look, this is what you protected when you made those difficult decisions, this happiness, this peace." And yes, exactly, that's what I did. I'm not sure how my relationship with my mom and Taylor is going to evolve in the future, if it evolves at all. But for now, I'm at peace with my decisions and focused on my marriage and on the relationships that are healthy and positive in my life. And that, at the end of the day, is enough.